Doom Phalanx. Drazek Thek Anukot clung with one skeletal, metallic hand to the ribbed gunwale of the modified Doomsday Ark as it skimmed low over the flooded stone. While his old colleague, Lord Commander Threxek Thek Marak, had been ordered to lead the main assault against the high road held by the humans, Drazek considered the strategy wasteful. A foolish expenditure of resources, one that would devolve into attrition rather than precision or grand design. The Doomsday Arks beneath him were never meant for this work. In their original form, they were ponderous siege platforms, glorified gun wagons carrying the apocalyptic Doomsday cannon. But firepower was not what the situation demanded. Not now, not here. And Drazek was an artificer of renown, a mind capable of seeing what others missed. So he tore out their prime weaponry, stripped them like carrion birds picking clean a Titan's corpse, and rebuilt them for speed. Now they were brutal assault skimmers, their power cores diverted to propulsion, their hulls packed with warriors instead of reactor coils. In their holds, great chambers like the rib cages of a metal beast forged in iron, brass, and necrodermis, stood the personal shock troops of Khan Thek Drak Arak, the Iron King's own elite phalanx. Transferring them to his command had been an unexpected move, more surprising than Drazek cared to admit. His plan was elegant. Strike the causeway at speed, seize the turnpike that ran along the cavern wall, then sweep down the dividing highway to crush the humans from the flank, driving them from their embattled ramparts. It was the only strategy that promised swift and clean victory. But the true surprise was the king's decision to lend him the elite guard. Not because of generosity, never that. It meant the Iron King believed in his plan. And yet, when victory came, the king would claim the glory, declaring that his loyal guard had broken the human line. Drazek would receive no accolades, no elevation, no reforging of status. He was a low-born craftsman, a gutter lord who had risen on skill rather than pedigree. He felt bitterness coil within his cortex web like shrapnel in a wound. But it brought him satisfaction to know truth is a blade that cuts without being seen. The king would know who truly won this battle, and that knowledge would gnaw at his silent heart for millennia. The water that flooded the causeway rippled, thin diagonal lines spreading across what had been deathly still a moment before. The first Doomsday Ark rose like an aquatic predator breaching the depths. Green-lit waves washed from its ribbed hull like phosphorescent runoff, revealing skeletal bodies in bronze and corroded iron. Emerald eyes burned beneath layers of drowned algae, seaweed clinging to limbs and tattered armor plates, making the revenant forms appear even more grotesquely monumental. Behind them, elite Cryptek Forge guards clung to improvised pontoons and submergent skiffs, rising from the gloom in locked formation. Two abreast, the assault convoy surged up the causeway, skimming over the raised road before plunging back into deeper water, vanishing beneath the surface with mechanical precision. Far off, a lone squad of the 5th Company stood watch over the flooded approach. Whether their focus remained fixed on the greater battle where Brother Chaplain Wolfgar led the defense, or whether the gods of the warp clouded mortal attention, no chronicler would ever agree. The convoy slipped beneath the water once more, the last vehicles plowing under in a silent, orderly descent, following the road's submerged surface like a hidden artery of invasion. Only when the sergeant of the 5th glanced toward the causeway did he notice the disturbed water, ripples where none should be. Believing it merely a pump cycle or the churn of the flooded turbines, he dismissed it. The causeway lay empty, quiet, no slow-marching Necron phalanxes, no bronze tide. He trusted his eyes and looked back to the grand battle. Drazek Tek Anukot felt all lingering resentment wash away with the water streaming from his assault barge. His craft, third in the attack formation, cut through the flood with silent precision. They had already traveled halfway around the sunken city's circumference. His timing had been flawless. As architect of this assault, he had aligned their advance with the pump housing switchover and the great city's repair cycle. If the foe possessed functioning scanners, the motive signatures of his submergence vehicles would be drowned beneath the roar of the ancient flood machinery. So far, the strategy held true. Submerged once more, his convoy surged forward beneath the murk, slicing through drifting weeds and metallic kelp. He rested a skeletal palm upon his war scythe. For once his title, Blade of the King, might be literal. Perhaps then his elite, Cryptek-made guard would grant him the respect so long denied. He transmitted a data canticle across the Phalanx. Next phase, open ground, maximum velocity, weapon variants, provide suppressive fire. Should I fall, Crypt Lord Kalik assumes precedence. The convoy pressed onward. The foremost craft hovered inches beneath the surface, ready to break the flood like a blade. Far along the half-flooded high road, between Chaplain Wolfgar's embattled line and Captain Toonbald's outpost at the causeway's summit, Shipmaster Sigibild braced his oculus against a broken temple column to observe the battle. He watched the third Necron assault break against the Void Revenants' defenses and the arrival of 2 fresh Worthen companies reinforcing Wolfgar's line. Behind him, his ad hoc troops whispered anxiously. Talk of the ruins, of the necropolis, of the destruction of their ship. Sigibild heard every word, yet he did not silence them. These were not Void armsmen, those he had already sent to serve under Wolfgar. Here on the high road, he commanded volunteers from his ship's crew, gunners, engineers, navigators, servitor techs, deck cleaners, even cooks. They had chosen to stay at his side, taking up arms while the rest had evacuated planetside. He had not expected to fight a war. His task was simple: maintain communications with the 5 isolated Second Company Gat Stelm posted at the turnpike where the high road met the sunken city. He exhaled slowly, watching the distant fight below. It seemed the Necron push was faltering, the metal tide falling back down the slope. Good. This was not his battle. Idly, his oculus drifted toward a 5th Company squad positioned atop a shattered monolith in the darkened quarter of the city, a perfect vantage point. He watched them unleash plasma into the main battle line and felt a brief, grim satisfaction. Let them burn for what they did to our ship. Then he angled the oculus to where Captain Toonbald should be posted, not that he expected much. Perhaps the captain watched as he did, but something, movement, caught in the oculus return sweep. A ripple, too fast, too deliberate. Fear, he called, keeping the lens fixed. Movement in the water, fast. Do you have anything? Fear, helmswoman of the Lost Welsieks, glanced at her auspex. Negative threat, Lord. Captain Toonbald warned us, the city pumps cycle. It reads as a power surge. Sigibild nodded, momentarily reassured until logic returned. A regular surge could be used as cover. He looked again. The ripples were still there, and then a metallic hull broke the surface, its ribs glowing toxic green. Another followed, then another. His voice snapped to command. Garspec? The Vox officer looked up. Lord? Contact Sergeant Dunafon of the 5th Company, bearing 305 degrees northwest, rapid movement. Garspec relayed the warning. High upon the monolith, Sergeant Dunafon received the message. He turned, saw the coordinates, saw the shapes rising from the water. One craft, then several. No, a column. Their skeletal hulls holding troops like iron wombs. Dunafon opened Company Vox. Target bearing confirmed 305. Engine kill priority. Fire at will. The Doomsday Arcs burst fully into view, skimming up the causeway at breakneck speed. Drazek raised his blade toward the tall monolith. Built for a glaive lord whose tomb had drowned, his machinery corroded to dust. One arc, unmodified and bearing its full primary armament, glided from the formation and halted. Far above, targeting data spooled across Dunafon's helm. Servitor skulls feeding range and speed into his mind through a roaring noospheric link. His 2 plasma cannons adjusted, rising like twin suns preparing to birth fire. He gave the order to fire, and in the same half-second, the Doomsday Cannon spoke. The monolith blazed green. Dunafon and his entire squad were erased in 0.5 seconds, armor liquefying into vapor, bone dissolving into ash. His lungs burst outward through holes torn in his chest. His skull flayed open as his Vox finished transmitting the final syllable of his command. The 5th Company squad ceased to exist. Yet, in that same instant, the dead fired. 2 plasma bolts, launched by fingers already lifeless, struck their target. The lead arc split apart, detonating into shrapnel and molten circuitry. Burning metal rained into the flood, and Cryptek guard tumbled screaming into the depths below. Drazek's barge smashed through the wreckage, casting it aside like a corpse, and surged into second position in the charge. Captain Toonbald adjusted his Oculus optics, lenses hissing as they refocused on the killing ground below. He caught sight of Wolfgar driving a countercharge into the Necron vanguard, the chaplain's Crozius wreathed in crackling oathlight. Beside him, a lone wolfsword raised his horn and called the warwargs back from their blood frenzy. Tonbald repressed the smile that threatened to break his warrior's mask. Seeing the cyber beast tear the Xeno's limb from metallic limb had been reassuring. He had feared the wargs, flesh and steel, might not survive contact with pure unliving metal. They had proven him wrong. There had been no hesitation, no fear. He turned to the 4 Astartes at his side. The sting of Wolfgar's rebuke still throbbed like a bruise beneath his armor. Likewise, the fact that only 4 brothers had followed him to this watch point gnawed bitterly. He had not commanded them, merely allowed volunteers, yet here he stood, isolated, while the bulk of the Grey Company fought under the chaplain's gaze. He had jeopardized his standing among the captains, and soon he would face Bornwolf and Edric. He did not relish that reckoning. His gauntleted hand tightened around the oculus, servo motors whining in frustration. A momentary flicker caught his eye. The Astartes atop the shattered monolith suddenly wheeled, aiming their heavy weapons toward the causeway. Dunafon had seen something. The recognition took less than a heartbeat. The impact took only half of one. A lance of emerald death cut across the horizon and hammered the monolith's summit. Toonbald watched Dunafon dissolve into vapor, one heartbeat alive, the next nothing but dispersing ash. Shock hit him like a bolter round. He lowered the oculus, following with naked eye the echo of the plasma strike that had drawn the Necron's retaliation. Below, the convoy came into view, skeletal chassis, engines humming with grave-cold power. One of their lead vehicles blossomed into an explosion where the plasma hit, but the rest accelerated, thundering up the causeway toward his precarious position. The cold hit him then, hard. He was holding the turnpike with 4 Astartes, 4 warriors against an entire armored column. Yet beneath the terror, something else surged like molten iron in his chest. Vindication. He had been right. "Scatter," he barked. The 4 Gastelm of the Grey Company, until now resting in silent vigilance, moved instantly, sprinting in 2 pairs toward the broken statuary flanking the roadway. They vanished in disciplined motion, and in the same second the ancient temple they had used as a watchpost evaporated in a storm of green fire. They were no longer there. Drazek Thek Anukot raised his Void Edge war scythe, signaling the advance. The lead Doomsday Ark transport surged ahead in a burst of grav distortion. Drazek emitted a clipped data command through Binheric bursts, ordering the machine to divert from the causeway. The cluster of half-collapsed temples at the top of the rise could be occupied by hostiles. He would have secured them first, rather than relying on the brutish simplicity of a single Doomsday blast. But the Cryptek Guard commander piloting the Ark ignored him, aloof, arrogant. The vehicle skimmed on, engines growling with gravitic contempt. Drazek caught a flicker of gray ceramite among the smoking roofs. "Fool," he spat in glitched Necronter. Lorimer and Brokewolf let the first Ark roll past their position, leaving it to Withermund and Sinrio, who held the heavy weapon. Lorimer thumbed the ignition rune of his hand flamer, and Brockwolf silently armed a Melta charge with mechanical precision. The Ark drifted past the sundered wall. Withermund fired. The Melta gun howled like a miniature star. The prow of the Ark buckled inward, liquefying as the grav plate seized. The transport hit the ground nose first, upending, spilling its elite Cryptek Guard like pieces scattered from a regicide board. Before the dazed metal warriors could rise, Sinrio stepped out from cover and tossed a crack grenade neatly into their midst. The blast shredded the fallen Necrons into a fountain of atomized alloy. The 2 Astartes withdrew immediately, sliding into the ruins they had prepared, just as planned. The road would now choke with burning wreckage, halting any rapid advance. Drazek realized the trap instantly. The road, now blocked by the crippled Ark, would force the convoy to bottleneck or charge through the dead vehicle. There were options. He could override the collision parameters and plow straight through, but the probability of catastrophic detonation was high. He sent another override impulse to the driver. The Cryptek Guard pilot resisted, attempting to firewall Drazek from his own transport. Lines of countercode formed, insolent, disrespectful. Drazek had no patience for political defiance. He decapitated his pilot, Silver-green blood hissed across the controls. The machine became his the moment he seized the helm. He deliberately steered it into the temple ruins. Lorimer and Brokewolf, setting their next trap, were startled when the second arc suddenly veered, crashing into the ruins beside them. They ignored it for now. A third transport slid into the bottleneck to take its place. Brokewolf hurled a melt-a-charge with a practiced throw. The blast tore through the skimmer's underside. The vehicle rolled, corkscrewing as the grav drive died, crushing Cryptek guard from the first wreck beneath its collapsing bulk. Lorimer strode forward, bathing the interior in liquid promethium, turning its occupants into shrieking molten silhouettes. Switching to Bolter, he fired single-controlled shots into any warrior that attempted to rise. A tall officer, wielding twin blades, climbed out of the flaming arc. Lorimer did not hesitate. One bolt round blew away the artificial tendons of the Necron's left hand. Another shattered the right. As the warrior dropped its weapons, Lorimer drove his chain bayonet into its thorax, shattering the spine rod. The officer died in a flurry of sparks. Lorimer retreated into the smoke-filled ruin. Drazek emerged from his crashed transport. His remaining Cryptek guard were intact, save 2 crushed beneath masonry. He investigated their memory cores briefly, then gestured for the rest to clear the building. Inside, Brokewolf advanced deeper and lobbed a plasma grenade over a fallen wall. The crashed arc outside detonated in a starburst of violet fire, its occupants already dead. Necron warriors surged through the shattered masonry behind him. Brokewolf opened fire. 3 fell to bolter rounds. A 4th he punched in the jaw, dislocating the skull and tearing it free with a wrenching twist. More Cryptek guard came. Brokewolf fired again, but a barrage of Gauss beams hit him. His weapon arm disintegrated at the elbow, the bolter collapsing into molten slag. His nerves burned as the armor peeled away like wax under a furnace. He drew a final breath, pulled the pins free of his grenade clip, 1 melt-a-charge and a cluster of plasma grenades. With the last motor signals left to him, he threw the entire satchel into the advancing Necrons as his faceplate dripped away in dissolving slag. His body fell, a single finger twitching amidst 3 empty grenade pins. Outside, Lorimer reloaded and sprinted back to Brokewolf's position. Seeing his brother melting into the ruin, surrounded by Necron eyes glowing like stagnant stars, he hit the wall for cover. The explosion ripped through the building, melta and plasma combining into a sunburst. The shock scorched his armor and filled the temple with molten silver and liquid stone. Lorimer risked a look. Nothing living or unliving remained inside. He placed 2 fingers across his chest plate, a gesture of respect. Across the ruins, Drazek stood amidst the carnage, observing him. Bolt shots shimmered harmlessly across the Cryptek's refractor field. Drazek lacked a weapon to respond, and stepping into the molten ruin was not mathematically survivable. Instead, the Cryptek mimicked the gesture, dragging 2 polished fingers across his own embossed chest plate. Lorimer stopped firing. He understood. A moment's honor between killers. Another engine growled in the smoke behind him. Lorimer gave the Cryptek a curt salute, then vanished into the haze, sprinting down the road toward the fallback line. Drazek lingered a moment, observing the space where the alien warrior had stood. So these flesh creatures had honor. Interesting. He turned, seeking his surviving troops. War was not merely strategy, it was study. Lorimer ran, hearts pounding in his twin-chambered chest, boots hammering the fractured stones as he vaulted the wreck of the Necron transport. A half-destroyed warrior dragged itself along the ground, its lower limbs sheared away. Lorimer placed a single bolt round through its skull as he passed, the shot bursting it like splintered jade. He dropped a blind grenade behind him without looking back. The smoke blossomed like choking ash. The Cryptek guard climbing from the ruin were not deceived. Their cold emerald optics cut cleanly through the vapors. Gauss flares leveled. They fired, only to pass through the gas-helm projection, the hologram bursting apart in static shards. Lorimer kept running. The temple wall behind him shuddered as the real bolts of energy carved through stone and metal. He reached the end of the temple column. Toonbald seized his pauldron and yanked him behind cover. Green beams sliced the air where Lorimer had stood a heartbeat earlier. He looked up instinctively and saw the glimmer of Witherman's melta muzzle across the road. Higher still, upon a broken overhang, Sinreo lay camouflaged in gray ceramite, half erased by shadow, bolter aimed along the causeway like a drawn sword. Toonbald stood immobile, bolter low, eyes fixed on what a hovering servo skull saw above the smoke. Lorimer caught his breath. Brokewolf fell, he panted. Toonbald gave a single nod. Then he will have lit a fire, so we may find the feasting hall in the afterlife. Lorimer reloaded, the oath acknowledged in silence. Down the road, past the overturned wreck, Drazik Thek Anakot strode from broken stone. The Cryptek guard were shamefully attempting to drag the ruined transport aside, as if clearing wreckage was a priority. Disappointment washed through Drazik's synthetic mind. He transmitted a rebuke to record in their memory cores for later punishment. You are assault troops, warriors of Konthek Drak Arak, and you busy yourselves with rubble. Perhaps you were misallocated at awakening and destined for artisan maintenance duties instead? Silence. The shame registered across their code streams. They froze mid-action, processors struggling with the weighted insult. Lord Noctopta, who had ignored orders, bristled. His defense came as a barrage of excuses, each one blaming insufficient instruction, each more pitiful than the last. Drazik waited, listening, letting the command channel fill with incompetence. The Cryptek guard observed the exchange, caught between two truths. Their lord was failing, yet the Cryptek was beneath them. Logic demanded a victor. Their lord Noctopta had not pressed the advantage. Cryptek doctrine always demanded one assaults into an ambush to break it by force of certainty. The remaining transports reached the head of the causeway. Drazik stabbed his war scythe forward. Assault. The warriors dropped the wreckage, weapons raised, and advanced into the smoke at once. Now that the enemy would focus on the charge, Drazik signaled for warriors from the second transport to clear the obstruction while he stepped beyond the wreck and began to reorganize the deployment himself. A simple assault had been halted not by human cunning, but by Necron ineptitude. He silently cursed the King of Iron for granting vanguard positions to such flawed awakenings. The rebuked Lord Noctopta led his warriors down the road, silent bursts of data cants passing between his escort, each packet containing accusations of his failure. Rage simmered through his metal frame. He raised his war scythe in a command gesture, signaling a standard advance pattern. Bladed warriors took the flanks, ranged troops formed the center, all marching in a daimon pattern, an ideal formation for hostile area denial. High above, Sinrio spotted them first. He gave the battle sign, then settled his crosshairs and waited. Below, Tunbald and Lorimer activated their decoys, sending Gasthelm holographs sprinting forward. The Necron saw 7 Astartes break into the road ahead, deploying into a firing line, one large officer with a tall, plumed helm and glowing lightning claws among them. The Necron Lord halted. Primitive trickery, obvious trap. He ordered his troops to ignore the illusions and fire only on the flanks. 2 Cryptek guard fired. Their Gauss beams passed harmlessly through the phantoms. Convinced, Noctopta marched forward, contemptuous. He swung his blade through the leading holograms as though mocking them, specters that did not even fire. A crude distraction. His war scythe passed through the first 2 illusions, but the third blocked him. A claw, real, sparking with power, caught the shaft of his weapon. Noctopta stared into 2 baleful blue lenses. Too late, he realized his mistake. Toonbald fired point blank, blasting the Noctopta's weapon hand free. He seized the fallen war scythe and swung it one-handed, bisecting 2 Cryptek guard before the blade's core burned out. Then he rammed his lightning claws into the Lord's chest, using the impaled body as a shield while the guard instinctively fired. Their Gauss beams flayed their own commander as Toonbald fired his bolter one-handed, blowing apart another 3 warriors. From above, Sinrio picked off the bladed flankers on the far side of the road. Across from him, Lorimer gunned down the opposite flank. Witherman then unleashed his Melta, bathing the center column in a roaring star heat blast that turned the roadway into a river of molten alloy. The ambush ended in seconds. Toonbald stood among dissolving heaps of metal. He looked down at what remained of the Necron Lord, only a twitching head and half-molten torso still impaled on his claws. The emerald eyes flickered once, then went dead. Toonbald let the corpse stump drop and stepped forward, reloading his bolter. The road belonged to the Grey Company. Drazek turned, facing the smoke where the trap had sprung. His optics flared, emerald shifting toward piercing blue-white intensity, an emotional surge in code form. The incompetent lord had failed catastrophically. He reviewed the data feeds from the Cryptek guard who had fallen, their tactical experience now absorbed into his own matrix. He discarded the opinion strings of the deceased lord. Useless. Instead, his focus returned to the Necron warriors still shifting the shattered wreckage of the lead Doomsday Ark. He raised his blade, pointing toward a solitary figure overseeing the salvage effort. "Overlord Maramunzu," he called. A flicker of data flow froze mid-channel. All movement paused for half a cycle. Noctopta and his idiot brother are now rejoined with oblivion. Their incompetence has destroyed them. I expect little better from those hand-picked by Thek Drakarak. He deliberately omitted the Iron King's honorific. Maramunzu stiffened, a subtle servomotor hum betraying his reaction. Drazek smiled internally. He swept his blade toward the road. "Congratulations on your promotion. Your predecessors had the rare foresight to remove themselves." The silence from Maramunzu was heavy with meaning. Then the new lord lowered his head, tightening his grip on his twin-bladed staff, and offered a formal salute. "I will endeavor to serve with greater efficiency," he said flatly. Drazek bowed in return. Too low. Mockingly low. Without further word, he turned and walked past, his cadre following. He reassigned the task of clearing the wreckage, a lowly function, to the blade of the king, Maramunzu's personal guard. A direct insult, almost courtly in its elegance. Drazek made no apology. He even added a flourished arc with his blade as if this were theater. Then, watching Maramunzu vanish into the mist, he silently transmitted the full combat logs, enemy analysis, and current battlefield telemetry to the new commander. Finally, a lord with some trace of merit, he thought. And then, like a true artificer, he rolled his sleeves, in code if not form, and began to assist his warriors manually. His hands were forged to work, and Drazek was no stranger to ruin. The newly ascended Overlord Maramunzu advanced into the smoke. He paused briefly beside the remains of Noctopta. What was left of the once proud lord was too degraded to trigger automatic recall to the Tomb World's crypt vaults. His shell had failed even that final dignity. Maramunzu looked to his elite guards. Then, without ceremony, he crushed the remnants beneath his heel. Promotion confirmed. Ahead, the causeway stretched into fractured dark. The road's broken edge still lit with the flash of bolter fire and plasma. Their objective lay beyond, shimmering in distant thermal echoes. But Maramunzu was no fool. This road had teeth. Maramunzu knelt in the dust, twin-bladed staff resting across his knee. Ancient stone rose on either side of the crumbling necropolis road, buildings once built to honor the dead, now giving cover to the enemy. A half-buried mastaba, shattered in the millennia since biotransference, offered perfect concealment. He traced his blades across the surface of the roadway, encoding control commands into the stones themselves. His Cryptek guard advanced silently down the left-hand side, Phalanx in motion. Maramunzu raised 2 fingers from the hand holding his staff. A detached unit of warriors broke away, vanishing into narrow tomb passages and alleys of the necropolis. With his free hand, he gestured forward, and a squad of blade-armed constructs sprinted toward the Astartes' position. Then, with cold deliberation, he overrode the protocols of a flare-armed warrior and took direct control. Its stance shifted instantly. Weapon raised, it took aim at the hovering servo skull in the air and fired. The skull disintegrated in a burst of heat and green fire. Tunbald winced, breaking connection in time, but not fast enough to avoid the pain of sudden psychic recoil. The cut left a ghost burn across his mind. He leaned around the corridor edge using a mirrored shimmer plate, catching sight of the approaching Necron units. Throne, he tapped his vox. "Sinrio, if you'd be so kind, start the festivities." High above, Sinrio responded without a word. From the dark shadows of his perch, he dropped 3 plasma grenades into the path of the onrushing Necrons. The blast vaporized 4, but 3 kept coming, zigzagging unnaturally, their movement code overridden, marionette-like, to evade targeting. Timbald fired. The first crumpled. He tracked the second, shot clean through its torso, but its glowing eyes locked with his before it died. The third kept coming. Lorimer put a bolt round through its skull, too late. Maramunzu, now fully linked to the fallen warriors, had pinpointed the Void Revenant captain. He ordered his entire flank to fire. Then he charged. The wall next to Toonbald exploded, disintegrated by Gauss beams. He dived back into the alleyway. Necrons came flooding down the left flank, advancing swiftly. Shadows deepened. Green light twisted along the necropolis walls. "Fagward!" he shouted, and ran at full speed toward the trap. Lorimer followed without hesitation. They burst from a side passage into a cluster of 5 Necrons who were not expecting them. Toonbald slammed one to the ground, slashed the second open with his claws, and blasted a third through the chest with his bolter. Lorimer shot a 4th in the skull, drew his Seeks, and embedded it into the 5th's cranium. Toonbald leaned over the struggling Necron beneath his boot and crushed its skull beneath his power glove. Then he looked up. More green light ahead. Back now! They ran for the main road, only to slide to a halt. A Necron firing line waited. Down! Toonbald tackled Lorimer. Both hit the dirt as Gauss fire streaked over them. Withermund, seeing the opening, aimed his melta and fired. The back ranks of Maramunzu's warriors turned to slag. Sinrio, from above, added precise bolter fire. But return fire raked the ruins. Withermund dropped a blind grenade and fell back, coolant hissing through his overheated weapon. Then through the smoke, Maramunzu leapt. Sinrio tried to reposition, aiming down as the Necron Lord soared past him, but he exposed himself. Gauss fire lanced through his armor. The darkness took him before the ground did. His body disintegrated mid-fall, eyes burning, gone before it landed. Withermund, wounded, dropped the overheated melta and drew his pistol. He fired. 2 shots struck Maramunzu's refractor field. Useless. The Necron Lord landed and kicked Withermund to the ground. Withermund reached for his Seeks, shouting, "Fag word!" as he drove it into the Lord's foot. Maramunzu staggered. Then from the shadows, a massive warg lunged. Its jaws locked on Maramunzu's chest, lifting both into the air and slamming them into rubble. Blade guards poured over the rubble. 2 more wargs emerged. One tore a Necron's head off. Another crushed a warrior beneath its bulk. A 3rd warg leaped and bit a Cryptek guard in half. Pinned, Maramunzu smashed his twin blade into the attacking warg's flank. The shaft snapped, but he embedded the blade and sliced the beast in half. He rolled from under the carcass, internal systems straining to repair his crushed frame. His remaining blade guards killed the last warg, but half their number fell. Withermund groaned and sat up. A wolfsword, charging after his beasts, swung his axe, cleaving a Necron apart. He grabbed the Astartes by the gorget and hauled him upright with a laugh. "Don't worry, little man, there's more to play with," he pointed. More Necrons approached, marching in perfect rank and file. Withermund tried to raise his melta, but the warning runes still flashed red. He cursed and bolted for cover as another warg dropped a Necron from its jaws and charged. Gauss fire shredded it instantly. Maramunzu, limping and scorched, returned to his warriors. He turned toward the road. There stood 2 Astartes, one in a tall plumed helm, the other scorched, battered, but unyielding. At the head of the causeway on the lip of the turnpike, Maramunzu stared hard across the ruined road. His optics narrowed. Then, with a wave of his hand, his warriors opened fire. Raindrops began to fall, soft at first, pattering on the ancient flagstones. He turned back toward where he expected to see 2 liquefying corpses. There were none. Lowering his broken blade to the roadway, he murmured, "Interesting." At the roadside, a wolf-sword knelt beside Withermund, a massive power fist holding the Astartes down with gentle force. "Steady, lad," the warrior growled through a tangled beard. Withermund opened his mouth to speak, but choked on the stink of wet fur. Something enormous and breathing lay across his feet. A massive black warg. It wasn't looking at him. It was staring down the road, ears low, teeth bared. Withermund wiped rain from his face and followed its gaze. Down the broken road stood Toonbald and Lorimer, fully exposed, out in the open. "What are they doing?" he asked, hoarse. The wolfsword gave a low, dangerous chuckle. "Live bait," he whispered, his gaze flicking toward the burning roadway where Wulfgar's warriors still fought. Withermund squinted through the rain and finally understood. On the road, Lorimer gripped his pistol hard. "Now what?" he muttered. Toonbald dropped his refractor field generator. The device sparked once, burnt out. "They come to us?" he said flatly. "You lost our shield?" Lorimer asked. Toonbald nodded. "True, But they don't know our technology. Lorimer checked his pistol, rain streaking his armor. You're making a lot of assumptions, Captain. Toonbald wiped his rain-slick lenses. That's why I'm a captain. You're a Gastelm. Lorimer smiled grimly. Yes, sir. Maramunzu stood to full height, repairs flowing across his crushed torso. His blade was cracked, reduced to a short sword, but he raised it regardless. Behind him, Cryptek Guard marched in lockstep, formation perfect. The road trembled. He did not slow. Lorimer held his aim. He did not fire. Toonbald shrugged off his sodden cloak. It fell on the stones, useless and heavy. He unhooked his lightning claws, bringing them to life. Still Maramunzu advanced, unwavering. Toonbald waited. Now! Lorimer dove aside. Maramunzu's optics tracked the motion, expecting a trick. Toonbald kicked the cloak upward. Wet fabric flew, smacking into the Necron Lord's optics. He slashed through it, and Toonbald was already moving. Lightning claws tore into Maramunzu's already damaged chest. The Lord staggered. They stood face to face. Maramunzu, processing his own imminent failure, overrode his phalanx and ordered all weapons. Target this position. All this for a single kill? He asked. Toonbald's lenses flared cold blue. No, for victory. Maramunzu began processing alternate options. Through the rain came a voice. Fire! Captain Sigabild of the Walsieks. The road lit up. Last rounds, plasma bolts, and missile salvos tore into the Necron line. Maramunzu's control net fed every damage alert, kill ratio, positioning report, and fire retort back into his brain. His mind caught fire. Toonbald pushed away from the collapsing Necron Lord and hit the dirt as the world erupted in light and steel. Somehow Maramunzu reasserted his own consciousness, even as failsafes triggered. His systems buckled, visuals fractured. Ahead, in the blinding light, he saw a line of humans he could not understand. An Imperium that should have broken now surged forward. Then, cutting across the death spiral of his failing mind, came a final command packet. Phase out, you fool. Drazik, Blade of the King. For the first time in his long, arrogant existence, Maramunzu obeyed. He phased out, his form vanishing in an emerald burst of retreat protocol, but a second too late. Witherman's Melta struck the space where he stood. The Necron Lord was evaporated mid-transition, and the warriors still standing around him were caught in the blast, atomized. Silence. Only the distant thunder of Wulfgar's battle echoed now, and the falling rain on the stones. Toonbald shifted, breathing hard, then looked down. Only now did he realize Maramunzu had taken his hand with the dying blade. Blood leaked from his gauntlet. He staggered. A shadow loomed over him. 10 minutes, said Gasward Cuthelm, arms crossed, frowning. I leave you alone for 10 minutes and look what happens to you. Toonbald stood, leaning on the librarian's staff. Lorimer moved to his side. Witherman limped toward them, his Melta still steaming, a lone wolf sword and warg following. Behind them, Captain Sigabild of the Walsiaks removed his helmet. Rain ran down his face. He looked across the causeway to the wreckage. You missed the battle, he said. Cuthelm nodded. I'm afraid that was just the start, old friend. We can't hold them with what we've got. Toonbald gave a tired nod. This was only to buy time. He turned, lifting his remaining hand, and gave the signal. Fall back. The causeway is lost. The troops began to retreat. Lorimer and Witherman covered the rear. Cuthelm stepped alongside Toonbald. Now, he said quietly, comes the hard part. They walked together into the gloom. Far off, the sound of the shattered causeway collapsing into the water echoed behind them. The Void Revenants' flank was wide open.